And we'll bring in a man who played cornerback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, a two-time Super Bowl champion, the host of the All Things Covered podcast, a fantastic one, and also a CBS Sports analyst, Bryant McFadden. Bryant, thanks so much for taking a few minutes out of your night to join me. How are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And so the first thing I'll go to here, of course, what everybody is talking about, is your tweet that took off, that Omar is working. The Steelers are very close to landing a significant playmaker, and so now everybody is trying to figure out who this guy is. And I know you talked to our guy, Andrew Filipponi, from the station earlier today. He was on the air, said he texted you, and you called him right away, so he came off the air to talk to you. And so I'm going to go over a couple of details just to confirm some things for you, all right? For
what you got? Let me hear.
For what I think that how the conversation went. So is it confirmed that this player is a wide receiver?
Potentially.
Okay. I also thought that I learned that it's not a free agent, that this is a trade that we're talking about.
I mean, that's a potential as well.
Okay. And that this deal could still happen. It's still very much on the table. It's not squashed, this possibility.
I mean, honestly, when it comes to that, I think so. I think once the season starts, there will be, a new face on the offense, an experienced player. Now, granted, there's a lot that could happen between now and then, but I think that's fair to say. And for us, being fans of the Steelers, we would love that. I think that definitely improves the offensive structure.
So do you feel as strongly about this happening now than you did whenever you tweeted that out? Because you had to have felt pretty strong about it to send off a tweet like that.
Yeah, so initially, let me get this straight, okay. Right? I'm in the media, but I'm not an insider, nor do I want to be an insider. And now seeing what comes with that type of information, I don't want to do that. That's too much attention. I don't really like that. I don't have to be the rapper or the singer. I'd rather be the producer, you know what I'm saying? Behind the scenes, because that's what I do well. In regards to what I tweeted, it was information that I received through a friend that is very, very involved in the NFL. It wasn't, I didn't talk to anybody from the Steelers. I didn't talk to Omar, nothing like that. It was someone who has been involved in a lot of conversations, basically, a third or fourth party. This same individual told me about the Justin Fields trade way before it happened. You know what I mean? And when he spoke to me on Monday, he said, man, listen, man, of course, we've all heard the rumors that Pittsburgh has been trying to find a way to get an experienced pass catcher in the building. We've heard about the potential relationship with a Brandon Ayuk, whoever, right? We've heard about that. That's been kind of like public information. So when he told me that it seems like something is going to happen sooner than later, I was like, oh, really? And I got super geeked because I feel like that could be a missing piece for our offense. So I ended up, putting that tweet out. But one thing I want people to understand is that I would never just put out something that I didn't hear of, right?
Yeah.
Some people are saying, well, he just made up that tweet for engagement. No, what do I get out of that? Like, really, I see now that's something that I don't want to be involved in, even if it happens instantly, because that's not the attention that I'm looking to get. I love talking ball. I love being an analyst. I love breaking down games and films. I have no desire to be the first one to release information unless someone wants me to do so. Like when Pat P signed with the Steelers, he wanted me to throw it out there on Twitter, and I did. So in regards to that, to answer your question, I do think something's going to happen. And now it's kind of funny, when I released that tweet on Monday, now we're hearing that Pittsburgh spoke to Seattle about DK Metcalf, right? I think I just saw that today. I don't know how valid that is, but that's something that I heard that was, circulating through the atmosphere. You know what I mean? So there's a time and a place, but one thing I do know about Pittsburgh, and as well, covering the team and being a fan of the team, they move in silence. things happen like the Justin Fields situation. That came out of nowhere, surprised a lot of people, especially after they signed Russell Wilson. When they traded for Micah Fitzpatrick years ago, happened in silence. You know what I mean? So I expect the same thing. But, based on the information that I've heard outside of what I released on Monday, I've heard the same thing you guys heard, that Pittsburgh is, trying to figure out a way to get an experienced pass catcher into the building.
Talking to Bryant McFadden, who tweeted out just a couple of days ago that Omar's working. The Steelers are very close to landing a significant playmaker. And so whenever I see significant playmaker, Brian, I'll ask you, because you tweeted it, what do you consider, or who do you consider, I guess, to be a significant playmaker?
For me, my definition of that is a player who's experienced in the National Football League, who's made plays, who's been a playmaker for their, organization, throughout their time. Significant playmaker is a guy who's been around the block, a guy you can count on. And now when you look at some of the names and, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the names that I've seen associated with the Pittsburgh Steelers outside of my tweet on Monday, even well before Monday, was like a Deebo Samuel, was like a, Brandon Ayuk. Now we're hearing DK Metcalf. I also heard maybe Terry McLaurin with the Commanders. You know what I mean? So those are guys that I would consider to be a significant playmaker, because our offense doesn't need a lot, right? But if you can get a guy that can give you some consistency in the passing game, that could be that one piece that you need to get over the hurdle. So that's my definition. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you agree or disagree, but that's what I would consider, that's who I would consider a playmaker, a significant playmaker, a guy who's been in the league, who's experienced. Oh,
definitely. I agree with some of the names that you just dropped there. They're definitely significant playmakers in the NFL. So I guess I'll ask you this. Was the guy that you heard the rumor about a guy that's someone that we've heard of before, like the Ayuks and like some of the other guys, the DK Metcalfs? Was it somebody that had been linked to the Steelers before you heard that, or was it somebody kind of off the radar?
Well, it was multiple players, actually.
Okay.
And then, of course, it was some of the names that you just mentioned that we've heard from afar as well. I'm not going to go into details because I don't want people jumping back on me on Twitter again. Because first thing people go say, well, B-Mac said this person is coming. No. One thing I noticed about that tweet, a lot of people don't read good. I said very close. I didn't say it was about to happen next hour. I didn't say it was going to happen tomorrow. I said they're very close. Then I put hashtag stay tuned, meaning like it's stay tuned, monitor the situation. So these are things that I'm learning on the fly, which I will not entertain again, because people are very, very passionate about the organization, which I applaud and I love. Right? I love that. I love how passionate our fans are, and they're wanting the same thing I want, because we all feel like we're a piece away on offense that could really take us to where we're trying to go. But also, too, don't come at me like I just wanted to make something up for clicks and giggles. That's not who I am. I try to be respectful by any means necessary. And if people took what I said and ran with it, you know what? That wasn't my intent. My intent was to provide the information that I received, because I was excited. You know what I mean? I was excited when I heard him, like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, this is what we need. But I never thought that it would happen instantly. I was just basically, putting something out there, which was a learning experience for me, for the fans to get ready to, embark on. But as I stated, we don't know what Omar and his staff has going in place. But one thing I do know, and with Omar being on the Pat McAfee show, he said that there's conversations being made. I mean, they've had conversations, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if you heard what Omar said as well, but I know he mentioned something about there have been conversations. So if there have been conversations, then clearly, they're trying to find ways to get it done, right? That's what I take from what Omar stated, a day or so ago about, conversation. And he also said there's nothing close to being done, which I understand as well. And I didn't say that it was about to happen instantly. I said close to being done. So if my tweet was read the wrong way, I apologize for that. But I just basically reiterated what I heard. It wasn't something that I just wanted to make up because I was bored. I'm not that type of dude.
Yeah, you could definitely tell that Omar Khan was trying to talk around something on the Pat McAfee show, that he wasn't trying to give away too many details. But I think anybody that thinks that your tweet was unfounded is just overreacting, maybe just angry that something hasn't happened since the tweet.
Man, listen, you would be amazed how many people felt like I just wanted to make that up for engagement purposes. I'm like, what? Like,
you know what? I'm not amazed. I'm not amazed by that because it's Twitter and it can be a cesspool. So, I mean,
no
people
question.
will say anything. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like this. It's almost like one thing I want fans to understand, and I try to say this in the most respectful way, fans will never be more invested in the players that are actually playing. You know what I mean? You will never be more invested because these are the guys that are going out there, leaving it on the line. And the same can be said for me being a former player. Like, I rock with Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh is the organization that made my dreams come true. So I have no reason to come out and just throw something out there for no reason, just for my personal gain. That doesn't make any sense. I'm just as excited, like I said earlier, that potentially we could get another playmaker for our offense. And for the ones that took my tweet to heart, number one, that shouldn't have been a thing to take to heart. It was a tweet. But for those that took it the wrong way and felt like I just wanted to make something up because I was bored, no, that ain't, come on, really? Like, what do I have to gain from that? So I wanted to come on with you guys to kind of set the record straight a little bit. And also, too, most importantly, man, this wasn't something that I just wanted to think of off the fly. That doesn't make any sense. I'm not that type of dude.
Well, talking to you, Bryant McFadden, former Steelers cornerback here on The Fan, two-time Super Bowl champion, host of
Before you let me go, I got a question for you.
Yeah. I wasn't going to let you go.
Out of all the guys that you mentioned to me throughout this interview and some of the other guys that you've heard circulating, through social media, whatever the case may be, if the Steelers were to add a wide receiver, who would you want?
B-Mac, you are one step ahead of me because that was going to be my next question to you because I was going to throw 5 names at you and ask you the same exact question. You want to hear those 5 names?
Okay. Let's go.
All right. I got Courtland Sutton, DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, and then the 2 49ers, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Who you got? Who you like best?
I don't see Cincinnati doing business with us.
Yeah.
I know we saw that with Kansas City and Buffalo. They've done that in years past as well. That's how Kansas City got Patrick Mahomes. I don't see Cincinnati doing that. Even if it's a great deal, I don't think Cincinnati do that. So when you talk about Deebo, Courtland, Ayuk, DK, I'll go DK for me. I'll go DK. The reason why I go DK is because he's still fairly new in his contract, so you don't have to really worry about renegotiating or trying to find a way to get an extension done, especially with this new market that the wide receivers are currently involved in money-wise. That's a nice bill to pay. He's still in his prime years, and he's a physical nightmare. The last time the Pittsburgh Steelers had a matchup issue like a DK Metcalf at the wide receiver position, you got to go back to Plexico. And I think a guy like DK and George Pickens, along with some of the other guys that we have at the wide receiver position, they all can coexist because DK is an outlier based on his style and his body, how he's put together. So we have different styles when it comes to our wide receivers that could be issues in the secondary for guys to defend. So I like the Deebo Samuel side of things as well because it's physical nature. But, I mean, how many times you have an opportunity to get a guy who's 6'4", 6'5", 235, running 4.3, 4.4, still in the prime of his career as well, and he's a playmaker. He would be a significant playmaker. You know what I mean? Now, one thing I did see, I don't know if you saw this as well, and I don't know how true this is. I saw this today that, quote unquote, I'm not saying this. This is something that I saw on social media, and if you saw it, let me know as well. But There were conversations with Seattle between Pittsburgh and Seattle. Seattle didn't close the door on the thought of trading away DK, and they said if it was to happen, it would have to happen post June 1st, something like that. Did you see that?
I did see that, yeah. And I did see the deadline that they put on that as well, or just the timeline that they put on that. So, yeah, I've seen some of those kind of things be floated around. And the reason why I was, in my mind, I was kind of putting away a trade possibility because I thought if it was going to happen, it was going to be before the draft while they still had, picks to trade around. I think now it gets a little bit more complicated, right? Because now you're talking about next year's picks, and maybe you're talking about active players having to be traded the other way. So not saying that it's not going to happen, but I'm curious to see if it does, what that compensation is going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that San Francisco was trying to flirt with other teams about Deebo Samuel during the draft. I think they were trying to get like a second rounder for Deebo. The two teams that I heard San Francisco was trying to, they were communicating with, and I don't know how true this is, you know what I mean? But I heard they were talking to New England and they were talking to Jacksonville. And if you look at the draft, both teams took a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. You know, Jacksonville took one in the first, Brian Thomas from LSU. And if I'm not mistaken, I think New England took a wide receiver in the second. So, you know, if something was to happen, clearly it's about picks for next year's draft. And that could be appealing for a team, might not be. But one thing we do know, with San Francisco selecting a wide receiver in the first round this year, Pearsall from Florida, you have Deebo Samuel, who was coming into, I think, the final year of guaranteed money. You have Brandon Ayuk, who is in the final year of his deal. Jennings, the third wide receiver, he signed a 1-year tender. So, you know, when you look at the structure moving forward after this year, there's not a lot of structure for San Francisco. So do they have the cap space to be able to pay, you know, Deebo what he's getting and re-up Brandon Ayuk and give him a brand new deal? You know, I don't know their cap structure right now, but that could be a conundrum that they could embark on sooner than later.
Yeah, man, that's what keeps this whole discussion alive for me, is because they drafted Pearsall in the first round. It's like, okay, what are they telling us by that pick? Obviously, there's some uncertainty there at the wide receiver position. If they're willing to give up first-round draft capital to go get a guy, you'd think that Deebo and Ayuk are very much on the market still at this point. And you're right about New England. They went out and got 2 receivers. They got Jalen Polk from Washington and Javon Baker in the draft, so they're stocking up at that position. The one guy that I mentioned earlier that I'm intrigued by, only because of the history here, and I think he would come at a little bit of a cheaper price, is Courtland Sutton. I like that camaraderie that he already has with Russell Wilson. What do you think about him?
I like that move as well. I think Courtland could be the cheapest option, but he has 2 years left on his deal, and I think he's trying to get a new deal. That's what I'm hearing. He wants to get a new deal. That's why he's trying to force his way out of Denver, because I don't think they're willing to pay him. But I think Courtland Sutton is a significant playmaker, because Courtland Sutton did numbers a year ago. If you had Courtland Sutton on your fantasy team, especially the second half of the season, he was a big-time provider for you when it comes to fantasy. He's like a body style of a DK Metcalf, you know what I mean? So reliable hands, you know, he plays the position well, and he's a different style of a wide receiver than what we currently have. So I would be okay with Courtland Sutton. Me personally, I know my personal preference would be a DK Metcalf. But if you're telling me Pittsburgh is adding a guy like Courtland Sutton, line him up. I like that. I really like that. With everything that we have, I think we got to go. The time is now. You know, our offensive line on paper, it should be much improved. The nastiness that we grew up on with Pittsburgh in the trenches should be in place. We got a running game. We got a tight end. Our quarterback room is better. Our defense, when healthy, we know what they can do. We know who George Pickens is. We know who Pat is at the tight end position. You know what I mean? So I like Roman Wilson that we got in the 3rd round for Michigan. But you're talking about competing in arguably the most difficult division in football. Yeah, if you want to add talent, if we can add more experienced talent, who says no to that?
All right, a couple more questions here, if you have the time, Bryant. The one that I had as I was listening to you talk about the candidates they can bring in at the wide receiver position, you mentioned George Pickens. Is there any fear there about another receiver coming into that room and whether George is going to be okay with sharing the field with that guy and sharing some targets?
You know what? I don't think so, because George didn't have an issue with Deontay. You know, his first 2 seasons, especially last year with George becoming a guy. I think the issue George had was just how inconsistent the offense was. The same issue that fans had watching our offense, right? I think that was the issue. I feel like watching George, and even going back to his collegiate days at Georgia, it wasn't like he was a part of a prolific passing game while at Georgia, right? They were consistent. They were balanced. But he didn't have any issues there. It wasn't like he was moping and groping there when, he wasn't getting the ball. They were winning games, and then he was getting his opportunities. He was cashing in. So if you're telling me a wide receiver that's experienced, that's a vet, comes into that wide receiver room, I don't think that's going to, bother George any means necessary, me personally.
Yeah, man, it was tough to be happy in that offense. I mean, when you're not moving the ball, when you're scoring 13 points a game, I don't see how anybody really was happy with anything going on. And neither were the Steelers because they moved on from Matt Canada midseason. So that tells you all you need to know. One final thing I wanted to ask you here before I let you go is Najee Harris, the option deadline to pick up his 5th year is tomorrow at 4 o'clock, I believe. What would you do if you're the Steelers? Are you picking up his 5th year option for next year?
Yeah, I would. Najee has really, flourished the ability to be a bell cow. And I love the relationship, the backfield relationship he has with Warren also. So I think picking up his 5th year option is the right thing to do, because if you don't, what's next? Who do you go to? This is a guy that has been at the bare minimum 1,000-yard gainer for our offense. Even with so many things going up and down with the offense, he's been a guy who can give you at least 1K on the ground, and he catches the ball well out of the backfield. And I think Najee understands that he needs to continue to get better, and that's how he's attacking this season. So I would pick up his 5th year option.
All right, Brian, thanks so much for the time, man. I really appreciate it. I know you've probably...
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I wanted to hear, who would you like to... Oh, you say Courtland Sutton would be your guy?
Yeah, I don't know if he would be my top guy. I think he would probably be my second choice. My first one, I think, would be Ayuk, because, you'd probably have to pay him, a good bit. He might be more like $20 million a year, which, you just kind of have to swallow
he would want more than $20 million a year.
Maybe 25?
Yeah, probably north of 25, I think.
Okay. You see, that changes things for me, but I think just pure performance perspective, like I love that he averaged almost 18 yards per catch last year. I think they got to utilize Russell Wilson's big arm while he still has it, while he's here, while he's hopefully still playing well in his career. Arthur Smith, the deep ball has been part of his repertoire going back to Tennessee when he had Ryan Tannehill throwing deep balls to A.J. Brown. So I think they need that kind of deep ball threat. Pickens is one, sure, but I want another guy like that. So Ayuk would be my top choice. But you're going to have to pay him.
I wouldn't have an issue with that. But as you stated, I think Brandon Ayuk would, with a new deal, seeing what the wide receiver market is what, $30 million? Oh. Yeah, he would want north of $25 million per year.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking 25 to $30 million, that would be a tough conversation for me. But in the end, I mean, I think I would buck up the money and do it and go for it now, because the Steelers, they're always in win now mode. They showed it again this offseason. So they're going for it.
And that's why I think it's imperative to add another pass catcher, because as you stated, win now. In our division, it's not like we're in a watered down division. Like every week in division play, you're going to see a playoff caliber team. And if you can go get a guy to improve your offense, especially with what we saw last year, why not?
So significant playmaker watch still very much on.
Yeah, and for all you fans that trying to say I made that up just because, stop that. Stop that. Unfortunately, I heard something from someone who I trust dearly, and I tweeted something that I probably shouldn't have tweeted. Now I'm getting trashed on Twitter for whatever reason.
Yeah, you know what? It's better to just see the responses, laugh at them, and then just put the phone down, Don't get caught in the mud.
I know, right? I'm trying not to get dirty, so I'm trying. Yeah. I got to act like I got on all white with some white Air Force One, so I don't want to step in that mud. But, man, it's tough right now.
That's right. All right, B-Mac, thanks so much for the time, man. That was great stuff.
I appreciate it.
All right. There he was, Bryant McFadden. Still very much a thing, very much a possibility. Landing the significant playmaker. I was trying to work the angles, man. I was trying to get him to give a little bit more about what he meant on that. And, he mentioned Deebo Samuel a couple of times very early on. He brought DK Metcalf into that conversation. He also, which I thought was very interesting, mentioned Terry McLaurin. Did you catch that, Tuna? Yeah, that's a guy that we haven't heard of in all of these reports. And he just casually threw that name out there.
My eyebrows went up a little bit when he said that one.
Yep. And that's an interesting name as well. That would be characterized as a significant playmaker. I'm just looking up. I'm going to do a quick Google here of Terry McLaurin. I mean, past 4 seasons, 1,118 yards, 1,053 yards, 1,191 yards, and 1,002 yards last year, and he's playing for the Commanders. So it's not like he's got Peyton Manning throwing him footballs. And, has scored at least 4 touchdowns in all of those seasons, has at least 77 receptions. I'd take that as my number 2 receiver, maybe 1A, along with George Pickens. So that was an interesting name that BMAC threw out there. We'll revisit that conversation here before the end of the show as well.